Every 4th of July, the American sky lights up. Millions of people gather across the country to grill hot dogs, watch massive fireworks displays, and celebrate the birth of the ultimate global superpower. To most of the world, it looks like a massive summer party. But behind the fireworks, the barbecues, and the endless sea of red, white, and blue, lies a deeply complex paradox. A story that is far darker, far more glorious, and much more accidental than most history books will ever tell you. In the summer of 1776, a group of rebellious colonists signed a piece of paper claiming that all men are created equal. At the time, it was the most radical and dangerous idea in human history. Yet, the very same men writing about absolute, unalienable freedom were building an empire on the backs of those who had absolutely none. So, how did a fragile, divided experiment built on such a massive contradiction actually survive? And, more importantly, how did a few isolated colonies on the edge of the known world manage to completely take over the global economy? This is the true story of America's birthday. To understand the 4th of July, you have to forget everything you know about the modern world. Go back to the late 1700s. The world wasn't ruled by presidents or parliaments. It was ruled by kings, emperors, and monarchs. The global belief system was simple. Power came from God down to the king. And you, the ordinary person, were just a subject. Your life did not belong to you. The British Empire was the greatest military and economic machine the world had ever seen. The 13 American colonies were just a small, distant business venture for the British Crown. They existed to provide raw materials and pay taxes. But the colonists started getting tired of paying taxes to a king who lived an ocean away, in a parliament where they had no voice. So, on July 4th, 1776, they did the unthinkable. 56 men signed the Declaration of Independence. Today, we treat this document like a sacred museum artifact. But back then, it was an illegal, highly treasonous declaration of war. If they lost, every single man who signed that paper would have been hanged by the neck until dead. But the document didn't just declare separation from Britain. It introduced a viral idea. It said that governments only get their power from the consent of the people they govern. It flipped the entire power structure of the world upside down. It was a brilliant piece of marketing that convinced ordinary farmers and tradesmen to pick up their hunting rifles and go to war against the most professional, ruthless military on the planet. And against all odds, they won. But this is where the story gets complicated. And it's a truth that America has been wrestling with ever since. The beautiful words of the Declaration of Independence clashed violently with the ugly reality of the American economy. Thomas Jefferson, the man who held the pen and wrote that all men are created equal, personally owned over 600 enslaved people during his lifetime. The Founding Fathers knew this was horribly hypocritical, but they also knew something else. The wealth of this brand new, fragile nation was heavily subsidized by free, forced labor. In the North, America was building factories, railroads, and banks, sparking an industrial revolution. In the South, a massive agricultural empire was producing the cotton that clothed the world. This brutal economic engine generated massive wealth, allowing the young United States to survive and grow. But a country built on a contradiction cannot survive forever. The tension between the promise of freedom and the reality of slavery finally exploded in 1861 with the American Civil War. It was the bloodiest conflict in American history. Hundreds of thousands of men died, but it was the crucible that forced America to finally decide what the 4th of July actually meant. Was it just a date on a calendar, or was it a promise that applied to everyone? By abolishing slavery, America took its first painful step toward actually living up to its founding document. With the country unified, the United States was ready to grow. But how did it go from a successful nation to an untouchable global superpower? The answer is not just politics or military strategy. The ultimate cheat code of the United States is geography. Look at a map. The United States is essentially a massive island. It is protected by the Atlantic Ocean to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. It has friendly, weak neighbors to the north and south. It contains the largest system of navigable rivers in the world and millions of acres of perfect farmland. It is a fortress rich in natural resources. In the 20th century, the rest of the developed world tore itself apart. World War I and World War II reduced Europe, Russia, and Japan to absolute rubble. Their factories were bombed, their economies were shattered, and millions of their working-age men were dead. But America's mainland wasn't touched by a single bomb. While the rest of the world was burning, American factories were running 24 hours a day. By the end of World War II in 1945, the United States was producing half of the entire world's manufactured goods. Half. They had all the gold, all the intact factories, and the only nuclear weapons on the planet. At a conference in Bretton Woods, the nations of the world agreed to tie their currencies to the US dollar, making it the global reserve currency. America had officially won the game of geopolitics, but they didn't just export cars, steel, and weapons. They exported culture. Through Hollywood, music, and brands like Coca-Cola, America exported the very idea of the American dream. The rebellious, freedom-loving aesthetic of the 4th of July became a global brand that everyone, everywhere, wanted a piece of. Today, the United States remains the dominant cultural and economic force on the planet. But it is not a perfect country. It is loud, chaotic, deeply divided, and constantly arguing with itself. And maybe that is exactly the point. Most nations in the world are built on a shared ethnicity, a shared religion, or thousands of years of ancient history. The United States is the only major nation founded on an idea written on a piece of parchment in 1776. The 4th of July is not a celebration of a finished product. It is a celebration of an ongoing, highly flawed, but incredibly resilient project. It's the story of a nation that started with a massive contradiction and has spent the last 2.5 centuries fighting, bleeding, and striving to make the words "all men are created equal" a reality. So, the next time you see the fireworks on the 4th of July, remember, you're not just looking at a celebration of the past. You're looking at the scars, the compromises, and the unimaginable ambition of the most successful human experiment in modern history.